Hello, I'm Dr. Jennifer Bay Williams. I'm a professor at the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky, and I am speaking on the importance of providing opportunities for students to reason in pre-K 3. The handout for this session is available attached to this session, so you will want to refer to that throughout the session. This session is organized from A to F in 30 minutes. We are going to start with some NAEP items, and then look at some research and connect that to what that means for classroom practice and how to make those changes at the systems level. So to start, here's some items from the 2022 grade 4. I want you to look at this item and ask yourself, what amount of reasoning or number relations are necessary and what number relations and reasoning are optimal for solving a problem like this? And the results for this item was 88% correct. And you can see that this could be solved using a standard algorithm, or a student with reasoning skills might notice that they're 2 apart and 2 hundredths more. So they might be able to use a counting up strategy instead of straight computation using a standard algorithm. Here's the next item. This is an addition problem, and students are being asked for the related subtraction problem to check the work. It's a medium item. Ask yourself, what amount of reasoning is needed to solve this problem? What amount of reasoning is useful to solve this problem? The results of this item was 51% correct. And you might think the other subtraction answer would have been attractive to students, but in fact, 35% of our children selected A or D, thinking they could check this problem using multiplication or division. Next item. What number is represented by point X on the number line? Again, what level of reasoning or number relations is necessary and optimal for solving this problem? The results of this item was 71%. 7 in 10 students in the 4th grade could decide that that X was 75. Keep that in mind because we'll be talking about the number line throughout the session. And finally, let's move to grade 8. Here's a medium grade 8 item. Again, ask yourself about the level of reasoning that's necessary and useful for this problem. The number of students answering this problem correct was 40%. So 60% of students answered this problem incorrect. And you might think that the reason that they got it incorrect was that they added a fraction after the answer of 39. But in fact, that was considered a partially correct answer. So less than half of our students answered 39, 39 and 5/10, or 39 and 1/2 on this item. And then when you think about reasoning being useful versus necessary, they need to at least recognize this as a division situation. But if they have reasoning, they can see that 158 is so close to 160. And from there, reason through the problem in a relatively straightforward manner. So these items preview some of the things that we could be doing better. And now we're going to turn to the research to see what's been happening over the last few decades related to students' understanding. So there's been quite a few longitudinal studies. These are hard to conduct and because they take time. And these are starting in kindergarten, and they're looking at the impact of what students know in kindergarten and then how that impacts their success in 1st grade or 2nd grade or 3rd grade. So in sum, the collection of these studies and others show that what's really important is number sense, number relations, and number combinations, more so than general factors like age and working memory and things like that, predict student success. And conversely, lack of these number foundations predict later difficulties or disabilities. So number sense, number relations, and number combinations. That allows students to be able to reason. So I just wanted to share with you a few of these to give you a flavor for these studies so that you can sort of get some insights into the reasoning that needs to be a part of our pre-K 3 learning experiences. The study is looking at 5 years of student growth, and I'm not going to read the whole slide, but in general, early on, being able to decompose is very helpful to students. As you can imagine, if you can take 7 apart into 2 plus 5, you can use that decomposing to use a efficient adding strategy instead of just counting on. So decomposing is important. And then later on, more and more important is being able to use the number line. So the item that was used on this test were students were given a large number and asked to place it between 0 and 100 in a relative position and correct if it was, within 10 of where it belongs on the number line. Here's another study. There's a team of researchers that have been doing a lot of work on predicting students' understanding. And across these studies, they continually find that number knowledge, this relational understanding, knowing that what's 1 more than 7, what's 1 less than 6, that relational piece, and number combinations, knowing 2 plus 3 is 5, are the strongest predictor of success in later grades. And so this is a study that was done predicting success in 2nd grade. And you can see that students that were not at risk, that's the bottom row, of these number sense pieces. So they had a strong relational understanding and they knew their number combinations in kindergarten. When they move into 2nd grade, 126 have no trouble with the fluency work they're doing. Only 24 of them had some difficulty with fluency. However, if they are at risk for number sense in kindergarten, then more than half of them have difficulty with their fluency, about half of them in 2nd grade. So just very poignant how important it is to develop number relationships early on. All right, there is many more studies on comparing, comparison studies. And the studies that are listed here, and there's a number of others, look at strategy instruction compared to drill or compared to business as usual in the classroom. So in all of these studies, explicit strategy instruction, so really helping the students see and understand a strategy, outperform the control groups, and they retain their automaticity with basic facts. So that's a collection of the studies. And again, I'm going to just show you a couple of them to give you a flavor for the kind of work that's been done in this area. This is Ternaki, and this study had three groups: the strategy instruction group, the drill and practice, and the control group. And the light gray is the students with learning disabilities, and you can see they really benefited from the strategy instruction. The students with no learning disabilities benefited from both groups. And in both cases, the explicit instruction outperformed the control group, which were students in the classroom learning what wasn't basic facts, which was, whatever was happening in their classroom. This is one of many studies by Arthur Baruti and his team of researchers, and this is one that has had a big influence on me and my work. And it is about the impact of teaching subtraction as think addition, which is, again, a relational understanding and helps you to reason. If you have a problem like 71 minus 65, you really want to find the difference, think addition to solve that problem, not use takeaway thinking. So this is an early opportunity to really help students think about subtraction as find the difference. And that's what the strategy does. And then use 10, which is that relational piece. We talked about that with the kindergarten work, knowing that 9 is 1 away from 10, that relational understanding is the use 10 strategy. So when seeing 9 plus 7, the student thinks 10 plus 7, so 9 plus 7 is 16, because 9 is 1 less than 10. It's that relational understanding. So in those in that study, students who learned subtraction as addition outperformed the other two groups, and similarly, the use 10 strategy group outperformed the other two groups, the third group being the control group, in being able to use the strategy instead of inefficient counting strategies. This is a study that I just wanted to link to, because what happens in our schools is students come into kindergarten with different backgrounds. And so what this is showing is that we have students coming into school, and high-income children end up having already some more sophisticated strategies. So explicit strategy instruction is that much more important to children arriving to school that haven't yet thought about efficient ways to add numbers. So you can see here that both of the dotted lines up above are the high-income graphs for kindergarten to first grade. And then the solid lines down below are the low-income families and their use of strategies, or their correct answers. So that takes us to research synthesis, meta-analyses. So this is a What Works Clearinghouse Practice Guide, which was also summarized as an NCTM research brief. And you can see the large effects for systematic, explicit instruction. So I want to be clear that this is well grounded in the research, not just the couple of results I've shared. And this was done in 2009, and in revisiting this research more recently in 2021, you can see again that the very first item on the list is this systematic, explicit strategy instruction. And notice the wording that it's to develop student understanding of mathematical ideas. So not memorizing, but developing student ideas. So we have strong evidence that explicit strategy instruction is really important. The third category is letter D, learning progressions. There's a body of research around learning progressions, and this is more recent work. So in the learning progressions work, we see that when students learn across developmental progressions, they do better. And that just makes sense, that they're able to build on what they know to make sense of what's coming next. And mathematics is developmental. So one of the very sort of straightforward and simple general learning progressions is by Arthur Baruti, and that is how students naturally develop their understanding of basic facts. So they begin with counting strategies, and again, there's other learning progressions about how those counting strategies develop, and then they move into deriving, coming up with more efficient ways of solving a problem. So for example, with 6 plus 9, they might do this idea of pretending or using a 10. So they might think 10 plus 6 is 16. It's 1 less 15. And then mastery, which could be that they're very good at thinking of it as 15 because they do that process in their head very quickly, or they just come to know that 9 plus 6 is 15. So that's the fact fluency learning progression. And to get a glimpse of work that is at a much finer grain size, here is a recent hypothetical learning trajectory for the very specific strategy we looked at earlier, subtraction as addition reasoning, and how when you really break it down into small pieces, this is how those ideas develop. So I just wanted to take a glimpse at those. And I'd like to spend the rest of our time really thinking about the implications of this solid research base and talk about what kind of ways can we get students off to a good beginning. So I have a list here for you, and now these are numbered. So keep track of the numbers so that at Q&A time, we will have a chance to talk about ones that have captured your interest. So number one, prioritize number sense. We see that in the predictive studies and the comparison studies. Every kindergartner needs to have a relational understanding. Again, knowing that what 1 more than 7 is, being able to locate a number on a number line within 10, within 20, within 100, and then flexibly decompose numbers. That's number one. Number two, where I focused a lot of my work, is use a basic facts learning progression. So fact sets and strategies need to be sequenced in such a way that students have the requisite understandings and skills before learning the next fact set. So I'm going to show you a visual from my work on Math Fact Fluency. And so you have to picture decomposing coming in from outside, because the decomposing is a prerequisite foundational thing to working on fact sets. But in this visual, these arrows point to what they need to know before they're ready to work on a different fact set or a strategy. And so if the foundational fact sets are ones that you can work on those separately and keep coming back to them because there's no arrows across that second row. And I'd like to map this to Baruti's 3 phases, that you really need to be automatic with these fact sets before moving into the strategy instruction. And this just makes sense. You cannot implement a use 10 strategy if you don't know 10 and some more. You have to be automatic with 10 and some more in order to not be overwhelmed with the steps of thinking through what one less than 10 and some more would be. So these are, just breaking down what are the things you need to know to do pretend to 10. I call it pretend to 10. It's from Baruti's work on use 10. But for first graders, second graders, this idea of pretending it's a 10 just resonates with them. Number 3, explicitly teach strategies. Explicit strategy instruction must be understood by teachers. It's not direct instruction or drill, but instruction that uses visuals and context to help students make sense of a strategy. I want to give just a snippet of what that looks like. So we're going to use stories and visuals to help students understand the use a 10 or pretend to 10 strategy. So one way to do that is to start with a story that uses one of those foundational facts. So in this story, it's about having 10 crowns. You have 10 crowns. You just get a new set of 8 crowns. How many crowns are now in your crown box? So a teacher would be talking with students and write the equation 10 plus 8 equals 18 on the board, the smart board, or on a piece of newsprint. And then go to story 2. Your sister has a box with 9 crowns in it. She also got a new set of 8 crowns and adds them to her box. How many crowns are now in her crown box? Use your work from the first story to help you solve this one. Give students a chance to think, pair, share. They come up with their answer, 9 plus 8 equals 17, and they explain their thinking. And they start to see how 10 plus 8 and 9 plus 8 are related to each other. So they're using their reasoning to support their reasoning. Beyond stories, we can use visuals. So we could pair a visual like this where students see it, then they don't see it, then they see it, then they don't see it, then they see it, and they say 16, how do you see it? 10 plus 6. And again, the teacher writes the equation on the board. And then the next one is this. And so students will see it, it goes away, they get 2 quick looks, and then on the third look, they say how many and how they see it. And students may see it as moving one over, a making 10 strategy, or they may see it as one less than the problem before. The teacher writes the equation underneath the other one. And if the students didn't see it in the visual, they now have the 2 equations to look at and see what they notice, and that they can explain about the relationship among those equations. So again, relational understanding and reasoning. Number 4, ensure that practice maximizes learning. And I'm going to specifically speak to basic facts, but this idea is true beyond basic facts. When students are doing the same strategy over and over and over again, they're just getting something down. There's very little reasoning. It's more of a memorization process. But we could engage students in reasoning to support their number sense development, and in turn that supports their reasoning, as we saw in the research. So I want to go back to these research findings, and I'd like to connect to the other things on this list. So we could play games. This is a game called Fix, Add-End, War. And when you turn these cards over that notice have 10 frames on them, each child explains their thinking using a sentence frame. So you're giving them a chance to explain their thinking. So the child on the right might say, 10 plus 7 is 17, 1 less is 16. Or they might use the full sentence frame to answer the problem. Then the person on the left also explains their strategy, and the student with the highest sum takes the 2 cards, and they flip the cards over again and play until their cards are gone, and then they just keep playing. As a teacher, when they really are doing well with 9, you can flip the 9 out and put in an 8 and have them think about how they would use 8 and what's the relationship between 10 and 8. So in looking at this, just this game with the sentence frame, and we look down these high impact strategies, we see the use of visuals through the 10 frames on the cards and the instruction that we just did. The students are using Think Aloud, which you have supported by giving sentence frames. Our teacher has supported. And they have this assisted learning, because if they're stuck, their partner is going to jump in and assist them with how they could use the strategy to add. And meanwhile, while the students are playing this game, the teacher is walking around and hearing their ability to say the strategy. And so they're able to get a good formative assessment without having to do an additional assessment. So it's really assessment for learning. All right, number 5. The strategies that we just touched on, the making 10, the pretend to 10, they grow into general reasoning strategies. So we have talked about this idea of use 10 or pretend to 10. So I just want to take it to the next level. And I want to say on this good beginning, as important as automaticity are the reasoning strategies that are developed. So let's just see how, if we grow 8 plus 9 to something like 48 plus 49, and we again use this idea of quick looks, it would look like this. You show 2 numbers with their 10 frames and ask students to mentally add, share answers, and how students thought about it. So one student might raise, you give some think time, of course, and partner time. And then a student might share that they moved 1 dot over in their mind. So they thought about it as 47 plus 50, the making 10 strategy. Another student might say, I just thought they're both close to 50. I added to get 100, and then I could see the 3 empty spaces. So I subtracted 3 to get 97. So these strategies can grow over time, and not just to whole numbers, but these strategies for basic facts grow to decimals and they grow to fractions. So instead of making 10, which is the basic fact strategy, making tens, which you just saw with 48 plus 49, with decimals and fractions, they are making a whole by moving some over, which really supports, again, strengthens their number sense while also using their number sense to help them to reason and solve problems efficiently. And you can see that's true both for making 10 and the use a 10 or pretend to 10. So those are my 5 suggestions, mostly related to basic facts, because I really feel deeply, based on the research I have read and the many schools that I've worked with, that if we change the way we teach basic facts to ensure that students have these visuals and stories and meaningful practice, that they will in fact develop the automaticity and to become confident and competent in mathematics. So how do we go about doing this? Changing basic facts is a change of a cultural practice. So we have to really think across the system to do this. So I just have a short list here, and I could spend another 20 minutes unpacking any one of these. But for sure, we have to think about what is important, what is required to be a kindergarten teacher, what's required to be a first grade teacher, what's the knowledge base? Because in our current models, we aren't getting enough time focusing on kindergarten ideas. This idea of decomposing and subitizing and all the specialization for the young ones is not going to be well addressed in most pre-service teacher programs. So how do we ensure that people teaching at those levels are well prepared? So maybe the answer is in the next line, which is on-site expertise. It is commonplace in the United States of America to have literacy specialists in elementary schools. It is very uncommon to have math specialists. And so we can see that our math results are worse than our reading, but yet we aren't putting the school by school by school resources into really having math specialists. And what I see is many literacy specialists or just general curriculum people or administrators overseeing the math program. And they're not going to be able to think about the things we just talked about in the research. They don't know that research base. So their intuitions for how to help students are oftentimes missing the mark. So then we go to curriculum, another huge influence on what is taught in schools. And so how do we make sure that curricula are aligned to these important notions? What would a tool look like that would help teachers and districts really make a good decision on the materials that they're using to ensure that they're using learning progressions and that they're engaging in explicit strategy instruction? Then, of course, like I said, it's cultural practice. So there's a huge parent education piece. The way that parents are helping their children before they begin school and after they start school is less about reasoning and more about how high they can count and how many sums they can find and things like that. So family education and engagement has to be part of the solution. And then same with administrators. Administrators might be nervous that you're not getting a test score from a fact quiz and that you're watching students as they play a game to determine where they're at and their readiness to move forward. So how do we help administrators understand and advocate for better K-3 math reasoning? And the state level is another thing that we have to, states have the opportunity to create math specialist programs, to initiate math professional development programs, provide funding, set requirements on the qualifications of early math instruction. And then, of course, all of that takes money. So that takes me to my final slide. Reflections and questions. So I'm going to go off screen here, but if you want to take a picture, this slide captures the research that we breezed through, the good beginnings that I mentioned, and the ideas I just quickly talked through for systemic implementation ideas. And on that note, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm honored to have been invited to speak at this conference. I'm very excited that we're going to have worked towards a collective plan to improve mathematics learning opportunities for all children. Thank you. Well, welcome to my session. Thank you for being here. And I am ready to respond to your questions. As you're thinking about what those questions are, I want to say that in the slideshow that you saw, there are 2 citations where I had a little mistake in the year of the study, and those are correct in the resources that the bibliography that was posted with this session. So if you're wondering which is what, then that's been corrected. Okay, so I see a question. It says, we feel a lot of tension with upper elementary students when they are still working on foundational fluency ideas and we want them to access grade level content help. That might be the most common question that I get. And there is a tension there because, of course, if they're doing multi-digit problems or they're working with fractions, the basic facts become all the more critical. So because of that, it's important to do the basic fact work. So games are a great way to just work on the basic facts. They can find their way into morning routines, into little extra time here and there, family engagement, intervention settings, and those games can be selected very strategically, like the game that I showed. If the student is struggling with their fours facts, that game that I showed can be adapted to fixed factor war with a 4 showing, and the student learns the doubling strategy if they know their doubles, and so then they work on the 4s and then they play that game, and then that game can get traded out. If they're struggling with their 6s, then but they know their 3s, they can do work on that doubling strategy applied to their 6s. And then many other ways to efficiently work on basic facts, which is, diagnosing which facts the student does know and helping them play to their strengths, what facts they know, and helping them figure out a strategy that will be their go-to strategy for a fact that is, one they forget or that they are getting incorrect or something like that. So another question in the chat is making a distinction between explicit instruction. Thank you for bringing this up again, because I said it's a really important point. And of course, I put a number of points in the presentation that it was, briefly. But to me, explicit strategy instruction, each of those words plays a key role. So the strategy is the focus. So you're working on like the use 10, what I call pretend to 10 strategy. And to make that, but you're building number sense. So you're trying to help that, that strategy be very explicit. And so you just go to the most concrete things that you can, stories and pictures like the dot patterns or rec and rec, where they can see that 9 plus a number is 1 less than 10 plus a number. And the more they play with those tools and see that relationship, then they practice that through gameplay. So the explicit comes first with the visuals and the stories, and then they practice it, and then it moves to automaticity, as opposed to direct instruction, which could also use visuals, but it tends to be when you're adding 9 plus 6, remember 9 is 1 less than 10, so subtract 1 from your answer. That kind of instruction without the visuals implies the student's supposed to remember, not that the students to understand the number relations. So that's how I see those as distinct, perhaps overlapping. But the explicit piece to me is bring in the things that make a relationship, that helps a child make sense of a number relationship. I thank you for the nice compliments in the chat about using my work. I'm so pleased with it. And in my career, I have worked across the grades. I taught pre-calculus down to 3-year-olds across many experiences. And I'm so passionate about, so convinced that if we teach basic facts differently, we can really right our ship. We can help students have that number sense and that confidence they need to be successful through the rest of their elementary experiences, and then they're set from there. Yeah, somebody comments that they would love to see more curricular review and analysis. I just agree completely. We really need to be thinking about the resources we're using and providing guidance to schools in which they aren't adopting a full series. And even if they have a full series, how to navigate, play to the be sure we're using the professionalism of the teacher to know when it's time to move on. And there's another tension there. But for teachers that are pulling their own resources from free downloadables, that oftentimes those miss the mark. So how do we help educators who are trying to craft something themselves to know what really they need to be looking for? We could go a long way to provide resources in that way. Somebody commented that it's difficult to read the slides. And I have a drive where I am happy to share the slides with you. I'm trying to see where I can post a chat because I'm just able to read the chat. All right. I'm just going to say it to you. I created a bit.ly, and the bit.ly is /IES23-JBW. Let's see. What's my vision for math coaches, specialists in the elementary school? Have I seen models that are effective? Yes, I did a MSP project when we had MSPs here in the Louisville area, and we prepared math specialists. They took 5 courses, 4 of them focused on content knowledge for elementary teachers, and 1 focused on leadership coaching. And in those teachers' classrooms, we saw statistical significant growth, and also within the schools. There's very little research on math specialists and math coaching. The Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators has recommendations on what math specialists look like. But I've seen, I go in buildings with my math specialists that I work with here in the local area. And if I'm there in the morning hour before the kids are in school, you just see the novice teachers coming and going and asking for clarification on the content that they're teaching and clarity on a task they might be using out of the curriculum that they've adopted. It's a revolving door of young professionals coming in and wanting to understand something in that just-in-time space. And so it's beautiful to see when there's somebody there, open door, able to respond to those questions, and then also to provide that intervention support for the students who are struggling. It's, yes, that's correct. What just got posted in the chat. I use capital letters, but other than that, it's IES 23-JBW. Messages for making teachers more vibrant in the classroom. Well, smiling. I think when I see reasoning as the focus, I see that vibrance, because the teachers, you see it in social media, are like, look at what my student said, look what my student did, look at this cool strategy. And of course, I see that also in these schools where they come and share with the math specialist, thanks for that idea. Like, look at the things my students can do. They're just brilliant. And so I feel like when we move away from some of that rote practice and that doesn't work well, so then we're working with trying to help a bunch of kids that don't understand it, and we move into these reasoning things, and help students make sense through, again, this explicit strategy instruction using visuals, then teaching becomes much more enjoyable. And the minute students really understand something, they're so much more likely to try hard and to participate. So, but thank you for saying that, because we're under a lot of pressure. And I work in some of the low performing schools, and the pressure is great, and it's easy to squelch the joy out of teaching. And that's really problematic for trying to recruit the best professionals we can into this critical job of being a, early elementary teacher. I think we're out of time, and I think the things I'm seeing in the chat are requesting clarification on the bit.ly. And I'm easy to find, by the way. So if you've had any trouble and you just want to reach out to me directly, my email is easy to find because I have a hyphenated last name, j.baywilliams, there's no hyphen in my email, at louisville.edu. Thank you for joining this session, and enjoy the rest of this summit. Hopefully you'll gain insights into how to support mathematics learning for our young ones, and we can collectively move together as a system. I absolutely love the quote that I heard from Cindy Martin in the opening session today. We're building systems, not pockets of success. So thank you for being with me today.